Hello everyone, welcome to StraightA. Dawson here, back with another video here today. And today we are going over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We got 3 teams left. The Buccaneers are third to last here in our series of going over my predictions for these stats. The NFL season's right around the corner, and I am very excited. Preseason games are underway. Checking out the highlights, checking out how the teams are doing, and maybe we'll talk a little bit about preseason before the season starts. But before we get started, please like down below, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and comment any suggestions for future videos below. Without further ado, let's get right into the video. Now, I'm just going to start this video off with a very big statement. I've become a very big Tampa Bay Buccaneers fan. In terms of, I think they might be one of my low-key favorite teams, in terms, especially in the NFC. And the reason that is because I love Baker Mayfield. I love the Buccaneers, whole team. Their coaching staff seems so charming and fun. I'm starting to warm up to them a whole lot. With that said, I think they'll do well next season. I'm kind of nervous whether they're going to go very well or very bad, because they could be a range of things. Just a year ago, a lot of us were predicting the Buccaneers are going to go 3-14, 4-13, whatever. I don't think that's necessarily the case anymore, but they still feel like a team that's very susceptible to that kind of action. But they're also a team I feel like low-key could do very good and make another playoff run. But they're in a very competitive division now, at least in terms of at least 2 teams, Buccaneers, Falcons, and maybe the Saints, but I wouldn't throw the Saints in there. So we'll see, at least with the Falcons, how they do against each other. Baker Mayfield, I think he's going to be very, very good, and I think he is probably arguably the best quarterback in that division. He's not the best in terms of a quarterback in the world, but he's easily probably top half, top 16, but we'll see. Rashad White, reliable. That's all you really need in a running back. Bucky Irving could take away some of that potential, though, later on in the season. We'll see. Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, arguably almost, that they're, top 3 in wide receiver duos. Maybe you could say Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, and then maybe you could say Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. Outside of that, you got, maybe A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, arguably. Mark Evans, Chris Godwin, very good as well. I think that one's going to have way better of a season than the other. I just feel like there's going to be something that happens, either productivity or maybe an injury, maybe some kind of coaching scheme thing. Something's going to happen where one player gets more highlight than the other. And I think there's one more obvious answer in Mike Evans than there is in Chris Godwin. But I genuinely believe one of them's going to get a big highlight and the other one's going to fall back a little bit. We'll see which one, though. Outside of them, though, they have just reliable guys. Trey Palmer, Sterling Shepard, Jalen McMillan should be fine. This is just fine guys behind them, 3 and back. Cade Otton, I think, is the worst tight end in the league in terms of starters, but I think he's fine enough. I mean, every tight end's at least, NFL caliber, so they're going to catch a couple touchdowns. They're going to get 400 yards, so, boom. The O-line, fucking great. That's why Rashad White's able to do what he's able to do, and Baker Mayfield to get the sign that he needs to get to Mike Evans or Chris Godwin. They're just going to very, very reliable, if not top 10 O-line, so we'll go with that. D-line, less impressive. I think they're getting a little bit older, a little bit less impressive as time goes on. But, Vita Vea, I think, is a very, very good player. Other than that, Levante David, I think is kind of not that good. And the secondary, I think, is actually probably the best thing on defense in terms of defensive linemen, linebackers, stuff like that. So, I like Jordan Whitehead, I like Antoine Winfield Jr., so this team overall, top to bottom, is just a reliable, good team. It's just whether the coaching staff is able to really utilize this team in the future. Looking at the stats from previous seasons, or previous season at least, Rashad White almost got 1,000 yards. I don't know necessarily if he'll do that again, especially Bucky Irving there. And Mike Evans, again, he already got 1,250 yards just from this season. I think could be very, very good. Antoine Winfield Jr. also doing very, very well as well. Baker Mayfield, 28-10, not bad at all. Rashad White, 6 touchdowns on the ground. I mean, granted, they only got 8 total, which is kind of curious, but, we'll take it where we can. Mike Evans, again, a lot. Chris Godwin, a lot. And then fucking Mike Evans fucking killed it with 13 touchdowns. We'll see where this all comes from, but I'm just going to go right into the stats. I think we talked a little bit about top to bottom what this team could be. I think it's talking about, what stats are actually going to produce now. Bay Buccaneers, of course. Let's go and get right into it. Baker Mayfield threw for over 4,000 yards last year. I think he'll do about the same, if not a little bit more. I think his touchdowns will be about the same, but I'm going to go a little bit less just because I feel like less depth behind Mike Evans. And I believe, again, one of the players will do very good, and one of the players will do very bad in terms of first 2 receivers. So we'll do 26-11. Seems like a good number. 100 to 150 rushing yards. I mean, he'll roughly get 150, but I'll say 140-ish. 1 rushing touchdown, just because usually he can get 1, maybe 2. 11 interceptions, like I said before. Rashad White, I'm going to keep him in the same range. I think this O-line's reliable enough to get him that number, but I'm not the most confident in the world, but we'll see. Mike Evans, I think, is going to have a 1,500 plus receiving yard season. So I think in the previous episode I hinted that at this point I was debating about a couple receivers to put in the 1,500 mark, and I had a safety net. My safety net was to give Mike Evans the 1,500 receiving yards because I knew there was a couple that I knew were going to, I wanted to give 1,500 plus yards. There's a couple I just didn't feel confident in giving them that big number. Then there was a couple along the way I was like, okay, do I feel more confident in them getting the 1,500 yards, or do I feel more confident in Mike Evans? And as time goes on, I kind of just like, okay, well, I kind of put myself in this corner now that Mike Evans either gets 1,500 yards or no one does, or we don't have that third person. So I genuinely believe the more I kept on writing it is because Mike Evans to me is like a top 3 receiver this next year with Baker Mayfield, the capabilities he's able to do. 15 receiving touchdowns, I think he's going to be around that mark. I think 13 was pretty high last year. I think he's going to do better, but it's kind of hard to say that when, 15 or 14 to 15 is now better than 13, because that's really hard to get. This was quite frankly. So I think it's very possible that he doesn't get that, but I think he still gets 11 plus at least. 12, 13, very capable, but 15 is my official prediction. Chris Godwin, again, step back type deal. I think it's going to be 700 to 799. That means still relevant, still very good for receiving touchdowns. I feel like something's going to happen where one of those players will not do as good. I'm not too sure which, I'm not too sure what will happen, but I just got a gut feeling that this offense can only support so much in terms of 2 top receivers that it's going to kind of culminate to something narratively that one of the receivers moves on next season or something like that, or possible trade or possible unhappiness. Who knows? But I just think this is kind of the narrative I'm writing in my head. That could be that. And there's not much in terms of like statistics behind the scenes. I just think in a lot of times when there's 2 top receivers and it's hard to support both of them for a long time. We'll see. Plus both of them are older, so it's kind of almost time to move on. So we'll see. K. Dotton, 400 yards, 2 touchdowns, sure. O-line, I think it's going to allow less than 30 sacks, one of the best O-lines. I have decided to put the defensive line in the less than 34 sacks role. I think they'll be one of the least sack-heavy teams. I think they still could possibly get in the 40s, but I think less than 34 is kind of reasonable. A lot of their D-line's aging. They could put a lot of pressures on them, especially stop run games. I just don't think the pressure is there anymore. Interceptions 14 to 16. I think Antoine Winfield Jr. alone could do very, very well, but I think about 14 to 15 interceptions is quite frankly where I would put the Buccaneers secondary. Then moving to their schedule. They have a tough schedule. I mean, if you take into account their division, I think they could go 4-2. They can go 3-3. I think they split with the Falcons. I think they could split with the Saints, but I'm going to go 4-2 just to be safe. So, basically say split with the Falcons, split with the Saints, and beat the Panthers outright. But I think they could also just sweep the Saints. I think they could lose one randomly to the Panthers. So 4-2 is pretty reasonable. Okay, let's break this down. Eagles, I'm going to just give them a loss because that's a very good team, 4-3. They got 3 very beatable teams. I think they can win 2 of them, 6-4. Then you got 49ers and Ravens. That's 2 more losses, 6-6. Win 2 of these 3 games right here. The Giants, Cowboys, and Chiefs. Sorry, win 1 of those games. So 7-8. Chargers win 8-8, and then you get Lions at the toss up. We're not toss up. I think it's a loss 8-9, but maybe they can get another win here or there. So 8-9 is kind of where I see them, but 9-8 I think is where they consistently can be. I think they're a very winnable team in terms of like they can get the wins they need, but they're also just a very cookie cutter team. So I don't think they really upset teams very often, but they don't really lose to teams below them too often. Now they can really usually compete. Like usually it's a good game between possibly the Broncos or the Commanders type teams. But I think they could beat the Giants and the Panthers and the Raiders all pretty straight up. But I don't see them upsetting many teams. So 8-9, 9-8, kind of where I see them lie because this is a tough schedule. I mean they basically have 4 or 5 default losses. These 49ers, Ravens, Chiefs, Cowboys, and Eagles, arguably and Lions are arguably all 6 of the top 10 teams in the league. And they have to face them, all 6 of them. Falcons also, again, in their division, not easy. I mean, I think the Broncos and possibly the Raiders, depending on your perspective, also are a tough team to beat. It's really, in Commanders, I think are not an easy win. So you go in there and you're like, man, the Buccaneers, while they are a fine, reliable team, they just got a ton of tough games. Like, even if you give them a win or 2 in the big category of like these upset teams, like the big teams that they beat, like that's still 4 losses by default and possibly 3 more just based on division. So you're basically ceiling is 10-7. If you have no mistakes and you played good enough to beat 2 of the top 10 teams, it's really really tough. So this schedule is not indicative to what the Buccaneers can really I think their cap can be. But man, they are aging, and this is not the schedule to get with this point in their cycle of being a team. So we'll see how they actually do. But I think it's all for today. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Leave a like down below, and I'll see y'all in the next one.